Under the Home tab, there's dimensions and it's aligned. If I was in the Modify tab, you also get that to pop up, but you also have this thing called Measure, and there's a down arrow. You can also select the same exact tool. You can also type in DI, and that will bring you to that tool as well. To dimension, I'm going to first select this X plane, left click, and then I'm going to zoom in and make sure, it's hard to see on the screen because it's so dark, but you should be able to hover over your point, and because your plane is shown and turned on, you should be able to see a blue highlight of your reference plane show up. And if you click on that, you should get a dimension. And to exit out of that command, you need to move your dimension line somewhere and then left click again. I'm going to do the same thing for the y-axis. So this other point, I'm basically locating this point in space in the x and y. I'm going to do that for each one of my points that we have.
Got 3 points in the 3D, but when I go to the level 1, it only shows 2 in my points.
Yeah. It's too high. It thinks it's in level 2 or something. I had to move one down on the z-axis to get it to show up.
Yeah, so if you're in level 1, if you click on the what's called level, if you look in the project browser and it says level 1, go ahead and click on it so it highlights blue, and you'll notice you get this other set of parameters that are actually, this is in the properties bar, all the properties that are associated with that view. If you scroll all the way down, there's what's called view range down at the very bottom. You can click on edit view range, and if you change your cut plane, like my default set to 200 feet, I'm going to change the top to be unlimited, make the bottom unlimited, and the view depth unlimited. And then if you make your cut plane something like 1,000 feet, this will make it so that you're actually cutting through the 3D model 1,000 feet above the floor plan view, and we're looking at it in unlimited view range. So if you click on all of that, you should be able to see all of your points then, assuming that you're within 1,000 feet.
If you don't have the properties,
Yeah, if you don't have this properties bar, or even if your project browser goes away, at any time you can click on View, and there's the tab here called User Interface. If you click on that, just make sure that your properties bar is checked, and then it should pop back up.
how do you get the properties bar checkbox there?
Do you have View?
Yeah.
And then you got User Interface. We'll have to look at, you need to make sure you get on 2012.
It's almost done.
It's almost dead.
Yeah, it's flashing.
Okay, so does everyone have dimensions locating their 3 points in the X and the Y? So when you click in your 3D view, you will also see your dimension lines show up, and they show up on the floor plan view. Even though they don't look like they're connected, they still control each of those points. So if I were to click on one of these points, you'll notice that those dimensions turn blue again. And I could click in there and go ahead and change the dimensions. Now this is kind of the first step of making something parametric. What we're doing is we're assigning dimension strings to an object that we can later assign a parameter to. Basically, parametric is some way of defining a position of a object, whether it's the actual X, Y, and Z position of an object, or whether it's the length of an object, a width, or some form of dimension of that object. We can change parametrically as long as we have a set of dimensions that are actually tied to it. So right now, in order to change all of these points, we have to do this manually, and we can't do it with a set of parameters. What we want to do is start to set up in a family type. We have the option of working with parameters. How many of you have worked with variables and parameters before? Probably those of you that have done Grasshopper. and VB script. Basically, a parameter can be thought of like I always compare it to a variable in scripting. It's basically a container. It's just this empty box that you can name it whatever you want, and you can fill it with whatever information you want. That information, that parameter, is a particular name. It actually contains some information, and then it eventually gets applied to some object that's in your model. When you change that information that's inside that box, your model will also adapt and change depending on what that parameter is. And we'll go into all the different parameters here, not all of them right now, but just a few. To start talking about parameters and setting them up, if you're in your modify, actually any of your tabs, it doesn't matter. Well, home and modify. Yeah, you have to be in either home or modify. You should have these properties section off to the left. And the one on the bottom is called family types. If you click on that, you get a dialog box that pops open. And it's just empty. There's something there called default elevation. And then there's identity data. You have family types and parameters. And the first choice you have on each one is you can create a new family type, or you can create a new parameter by adding it. We'll get into what the family types are a little bit later, but let's go ahead and start a parameter. Basically, the concept here is what I want to do is all of these dimensions that we've just created for each of these points. Go ahead and cancel out of this box real quick. All of these dimensions, we want to eventually assign a parameter that I can change the information in a dialog box, and my model, those points will update. That's what we're going to be setting up. And one thing that we can do, I forgot to go over this step, is if you click on each one of these points, just one at a time, down at the very left here, under properties, under other, there's this thing called name. Let's just name these points, just so we can keep track of them. I'm going to call this PT1. My next one, you can hit apply when you're done. Fatal error.
Did you just click on it?
Are you kidding me?
Oh, mine did that too.
Why are we getting fatal errors on something like this?
I got a fatal error.
Well, go ahead and save a recovery file if it gives you that option. Basically, what that should do is save wherever you occurred. Let me find out what's going on here. If we're having fatal errors on this, we're going to have problems.
Everyone gets an A. You don't know Reddit, but yeah, yes,
I opened it.
It's strange that happened to everyone.
Yeah.
I got my first point in.
good for you.
Yeah.
How do you know they saved that name?
Okay, so well, let me load this up. And wherever you are saving your original file, did everyone do a save as of their original file? Like I mentioned in one of the steps. It should have saved another file in there called recovery, and it'll be in parentheses. And if I hit, you'll see here when it pops up, I have this in-class curves recovery. This is also, I can access it by going to open, and it should be in your documents or wherever you saved it. It's called in-class curves recovery. If not, you might have to start over here. How about we not name the points for now?
It worked when I came back.
Huh?
It worked when I came back.
When you came back, it worked?
Yeah, mine did too.
It's working.
So it must be on a timer because it seems like every 15 minutes I've closed out here.
Sounds great.
So anyway, I'm doing